Welcome to Free to Speak, the New Zealand Free Speech Union podcast. If you enjoy the show, subscribe for uncensored conversations and free speech news from New Zealand and beyond.
Kia ora, and welcome to Free to Speak, the official podcast of the New Zealand Free Speech Union. I'm Dean Giroux. I'm your host, a council member of the Free Speech Union, and today we have with us Sarah McLaughlin. Sarah is a senior scholar for FIRE. That's the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. I love the way acronyms always...
We do have a good one.
Yeah, you have a good... I mean, it's just great. It just works so well. It's like chaos from Get Smart or something, you know? Brilliant.
We even updated our acronym a couple years ago, our organization name, but we're like, we got to keep the acronym. It's too good to lose.
Well, it is FIRE. FIRE is fire. So, Sarah, your special focus is global expression, right?
Absolutely.
So, great. Okay, well, Sarah's going to be joining us for a tour here, and that's going to kick off in April. So, and as you'll know, our supporters will know, our tours are just fantastic, and we've brought some great people here, and we're in that tradition with you. Like, I've been reading some of your stuff, and it's just fantastic. And the global focus is interesting. I'm really looking forward to discussing that, and getting into it, and why it's important for us in little old New Zealand to be concerned about what's happening in the UK and China and places like that. I think sometimes we look at it and it's good rage bait. We go, oh, look what they're doing over there. And we can also be, well, hey, it hasn't happened here, so that's good. At least we're not like them. But the world's a lot more connected than we think, isn't it, when it comes to free speech?
Absolutely. And there's so many things going on right now. I can't keep up to a certain extent with writing about everything that's happening globally. But you're right. It's so important to keep track of this because, all of these laws that are being passed in countries, the speed at which they're they're going across borders is incredible. Not just in a way that, if China passes a censorship law, they'll start trying to threaten people in other parts of the world, which is happening. And a number of countries do that, but also a number of, the countries that will look at what, their neighbor did and say, oh, maybe we should do that too, whether it's a hate speech law, whether it's tech regulation. And so the possibility that something that your neighbor does is, going to be a bill that your legislators are looking at a week from now is really likely, especially when it comes to internet censorship, internet regulation. Those rules are crossing borders faster than most of us can keep track of them. And I kind of think this is, the whole ball game to a certain extent. Internet censorship. It's not even just the future of free expression. What's happening right now on the internet is, kind of the most important question for free speech, not just 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So the laws that are being passed today are, really going to have a huge influence on what we can say in the future, what kind of information stays accessible to any or all of us someday. So, I think we're in such an important moment for free speech, and I hope that, I can help people understand what this moment means better. And I'm very much looking forward to coming to New Zealand for those conversations next month.
Yeah, well, look, we'll get into your tour at the end of it, but I think we'll even start now. You're in Auckland on the 19th, Tauranga, Wellington, Christchurch, and Dunedin. Dunedin on the 24th. All the dates obviously will be attached to this. There'll be a link in the podcast to all the tour dates. So Dunedin, now you know where that is, don't you? That's right down the bottom.
I do, yes.
Right down. So even Jacob Mishingama didn't go to Dunedin. He's not going to like this.
Well, I'm sorry, Jacob, but I have to do better than you on my New Zealand tour.
Some penguins may wander into your talk. You realize that?
Hey, anyone's welcome. I'm willing to debate anyone, no matter what they bring to the table.
I got a question. Yeah. Now there's a lovely...
They dress well. They show up in little tuxes.
Yeah. You may... Well, see, I would think they were people in tuxes until I put my glasses on. Yeah. Well, there's a lovely peninsula around there that you can have a look at. We work you guys hard when you come here. but
I
you
would
got to,
expect nothing less.
yeah, but it's one of those. I make documentary, and in the past, I went across the states and went to Springfield, Missouri, and
Okay.
no New Zealander was going to like visit there just randomly.
I
And
haven't even been there, so
yeah, well, that's the good thing about these work trips, and you go to places that you're not selecting, and you just get this unique experience that you never would have got
yeah,
if it had been left to
absolutely.
you. Yeah, but no,
Sometimes
it's
life takes
great.
you places
Oh
that you
yeah,
didn't
no,
plan for.
100%. No, the Deep South, it'll be wonderful. I think you're really going to enjoy it, and of course, our supporters will really appreciate that you came down there. So yeah, big student town, big
Great.
student. Yeah, no, it'll be great.
I
Um,
speak to a lot of students in the US and around the world at this point, and I think young people are kind of bearing the brunt of a lot of censorship right now. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they have to say.
Before we get into it, let's just start there. So how do you feel about younger people? Because I've got children myself, and I wonder, not generally, but
This is a very open-ended question.
I hate kids. No, but in terms of like say my children are very pro free speech. You know, it could be just me or I don't know. Like my sense is there has been a little bit of a thaw with even the under 20s, like the 18-year-olds and everything. I mean, these things are quite. They can be like phases, as Jacob's wonderful book shows. We have these recessions, and then everything sort of becomes a bit more enlightened again, and
Yep.
there's
We
no
relive
straight
the
line.
same cycles over and over again.
Yeah, yeah. So is your sense that there's a hunger for free speech with the younger that group at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think right now, obviously my experience is to a certain extent more in the United States, at least with talking to people and seeing what their feelings are like. But I think young people are right now really feeling like they've perhaps been misled to a certain extent by authority figures, and they're starting to see that there are a lot of people setting rules on what they can say, what they can write, what they can read, what they can do, and maybe those people don't actually know that much better than them. Maybe the
Yeah,
people trying to determine, what they can protest about on a campus, what books they can use in a classroom, what they can even access on the internet, in the privacy of their own homes.
mhm,
Maybe the people in charge don't know everything, and maybe they shouldn't be in the position of trying to dictate what young people who are, just starting out in the world, trying to understand what's going on. The fact that we're essentially rescinding, access to basic information to young people is really incredible. And, I think there's, maybe three or four big justifications people have for censoring free speech. And one is always and always will be think of the children. We have to protect kids. We have to do what we can to keep them safe. And I think maybe young people are realizing that this isn't necessarily about keeping them safe. It's about control. It's about censorship. And, this is something that is really impacting young people. But one thing I've been trying to explain to people is that these things that we use to censor young people are going to censor people who aren't 15 years old as well. And if we think that they will, I think maybe billions of people are in for a rude awakening soon.
yeah. Well, we'll touch on the under 16 ban and all of that hysteria that's maybe later in the interview. But so your journey to fire, like, did you? Were you a little girl thinking one day I'm going to work in free speech? I mean, what brought you what brought you towards it? I was kind of that little boy, I got to say.
Well, it's funny. Growing up, I'm not sure. I think I was pretty certain that I was going to work, with dolphins, and then realized I was terrified of the ocean, so I had to, move on from that one. But I was a political science major in college. I've spent probably to my parents' chagrin my entire teen years debating them about matters of the day. Uh, I'm sure they loved it. But, it's something that I've always cared about. I've always, it's this might not sound like the most intellectual reason, but I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't like being told what to do, and I'm suspicious of people who tell others what to do.
That's the best reason. That's the
And
best
so,
reason.
there are very noble reasons that I agree with to support free speech. I think it's how we create better societies. I think it's how we, the only way that you can really search for truth, whether it's scientific, philosophy, elsewhere. But I also just don't like being told what to do, and I don't think all of us should be in the position of trying to tell each other what to do. I think it's disrespectful to each other's humanity to try to limit what we can think and see and say. And so that's always been a little bit of my motivating factor. Um, in college, I was political science, and I then interned when I was 20 years old at Fire. That was 13 some years ago,
Okay.
and I never left Fire. So I've been here that whole time just building out, my research, the work I've been doing, and it led me to write a book that came out last year, which is, you can see it right here, part of the things I'll be talking about when I'm in New Zealand. But it's the ways, I wrote about the ways that, authoritarian governments are influencing, censoring, controlling higher education, and effectively trying to be the world police for what can be said on college campuses. And there's a lot of reasons why that's really scary. um,
Mm.
One is, campuses, for better or worse, people debate about this, but they're hotbeds for political activism where the political ideas of the future are being discussed on college campuses today. That's always been the case, hopefully always will be, that freedom exists. But it also influences the research, the ways we understand the world. The idea that a government like the Chinese Communist Party is in some ways influencing or even directly dictating what a university is going to teach or study is really disturbing, and that affects what we know today, but also the research that people 50, 100 years from now are going to rely on. There's really long term impacts from this.
Completely. We've had a few cases involving Chinese influence. Even I think one of them where it started was posters were being taken down. There was
Hmm.
an order to
It's
take all these
common.
posters down, and we looked into it as the Free Speech Union. And I remember thinking at the time, "Oh, this is a bit spy novelly. What is this true?" But now, yeah, I just accept it. I mean, but they are very active and stroppy. And
Yeah, it's
getting
common,
more
and
stroppy actually, like they're we our, former chief executive, wrote a piece for one of our major newspapers, and the embassy just said, "Hey, newspaper, you shouldn't have done that."
Mhm.
It's like, "Whoa," they're not even hiding it now, so it's quite concerning. I think if we knew the depth of some of the conversations that were happening, with university management, we'd I think a lot of people would be quite shocked. Um,
Oh, yeah, people be very, very disturbed. I hope very disturbed.
yeah.
But that's the issue. A lot of it just goes under the radar because people don't think to ask. And um, the scariest thing to me is the kind of censorship or self-censorship that's taking place that's never been ordered. And so this is
Mm.
something that I write about a lot in the book. It's institutions that are choosing to self-censor because it's very lucrative to pursue these ties and relationships in China or in the Gulf states, Qatar, the UAE. And so universities will build out these relationships with government officials, and then they know what those government officials want. They know what kind of things you're not supposed to say
So they don't
about.
even have to be instructed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This happened at one of the most high profile universities in the world, Harvard University. A vice dean at the law school forced a Chinese dissident on the campus to cancel an event. Nobody ever told this administrator he had to do that, but he thought it was the appropriate thing to do. And
It
and that's the
mm,
scariest thing.
yeah, that's really bad, but I mean, censorship will always lead to self-censorship, and I guess vice
Mhm.
versa. I mean, what becomes self-censorship can start becoming entrenched, and then, the de facto laws by that stage, I
Yeah,
think, you know?
absolutely.
Mm.
And then, you could have people in leadership who choose to self-censor, and self-censorship for them becomes censorship rules that they enforce upon people they have authority over. And so, yeah, it's a chain of people choosing to self-censor and then choosing to enforce that censorship upon others. And it's not really complicated why it's happening. For the most part, it's money. And that's something that's not just a problem in higher education; it's a problem everywhere. There's been a lot of high-profile incidents, where perhaps even a media outlet will feel like they need to self-censor because there could be some threat, perhaps of a lawsuit. It's just not worth the risk, and so that's scary to me. Yeah, the idea that we have people silently making these decisions because they think it's financially useful. You can't really issue a freedom of information request, right, to get
Mm.
records when
Yeah.
someone self censors and never
Mm.
writes it down. That's the really difficult thing. Sometimes this is even harder to track, harder to fight when we don't have. The Chinese consulate brazenly said sending a letter threatening to censor someone. If
Mm.
someone just assumes they might get one of those letters and acts anyway, then you have no record, but you have the censorship anyway. It's really terrifying.
You're starting to answer the central question that I had for this interview, and that is why
Great.
global? You're doing really well.
Good.
Why is global expression such a big deal for us in little old New Zealand, or anywhere? Why does it matter what happens in the UK? Why does it matter what happens in France? Why are all these things connected? We did talk initially about JD Vance's trip to Europe and how he told them off, which I think it's a nice sort of narrative to kick off there, because there has been quite a bit of pressure from the Trump administration on pressure or just rhetorical. Is he doing that for his domestic audience as well? Like,
I think there's been across the board a mix of rhetoric and pressure to a
mm,
certain extent. I think some officials who are um, working in a diplomatic fashion with counterparts in Europe have also made very clear, perhaps even in trade negotiations, these things are going to be discussed. But I'd love to address the JD Vance speech elephant in the room
yeah, do it.
because it's a really frustrating incident because a lot of the things that JD Vance pointed out were right. Censorship in Europe is worse than most people realize. I think people have this idea that because Europe is largely democratic and largely free, that means that you don't really have to worry about what's going on. They still have free elections.
How bad can
It's
it get?
how
Yeah.
how bad can it be? But there's a lot of censorship that people might not realize, both in-person protesters, people who just say something that offends their neighbor, but also on the internet. The regulatory behemoths that Europe, both in the EU and as individual nations, are building out, are really serious and can have um, long-term ramifications for what's on the internet, who can read what, and also influence companies perhaps to censor even more information than they technically legally have to because of the risk of more fines, regulations. It's just not worth. How many times have I said that? It's just not worth the risk of
Yeah. Yeah.
losing money, right?
Mm, mm, mm,
There's this
mm.
theme here.
Well, it's all about money.
Uh,
Yeah. If you, mm,
so we have that going on, but there's one big problem with what JD Vance was saying, and it's that at least in my lifetime, I can't think of a president who has censored more speech, committed more free speech violations and First Amendment violations in the United States. So we have a real messenger problem,
mm.
and that's a shame because I think people maybe rightfully might say, why should I listen to JD Vance on free speech in Europe when you can list the 50 different things that just happened last week that were bad for free speech in the United States. So that's the really frustrating thing.
Well, what
But
are some of the more
earlier.
egregious? Sorry for jumping in. Like, what are some of the more egregious censorship that you think you've seen from this administration?
Oh, where to start? So we have a lot of things. So just a few days ago, for example, the chairman of our FCC, which does our broadcast regulation in the United States, he started threatening the broadcast licensing of outlets who were expressing what he claimed to be fake news about the war with Iran. So we have the federal
Mm.
government saying, oh, we're going to be the ministry of truth and decide, free press be damned, what people can say about the war in Iran.
Mm.
That's kind of, one of the big classic issues. You need to be able to talk about the military action your government is undertaking. And
Especially something, an emergency scenario or war scenario, well, anything, but like the need for free speech becomes even more vital in a
absolutely,
democracy at
yeah,
this point.
that's
Yeah.
when you most need free speech, when you have the most difficult problems. And people think it's kind of
That's
the
what free
inverse.
speech is preparing us for, moments like this.
Exactly. That's what it's for. It's not
Yeah.
for to talk about the weather. It's not to say what a beautiful day we're having. It's to say, here's what I think about the bombs this government is dropping. That's what free
I've
speech
found
is for.
corruption. Yeah, all of that stuff.
Exactly. So, that's just one example. But at Fire, we've been combating, a lot of these threats. And to be clear, Fire is nonpartisan. No matter what your political views are, we'll defend you. No matter what political views are, if you're censoring someone, we'll fight you. So this isn't just because of a specific political view. It's just because this is a First Amendment violation, and we believe that has to be fought. So we're also, for example, working to fight this administration's viewpoint-based deportations. Targeting people who are here legal in the United States who just express a political opinion that the government doesn't like. And the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, is saying, we want to get rid of them because we don't like what they say. And that's a real problem. The idea that just because you say something the government doesn't like, they're going to revoke your ability to be here, that's not what America's about. That's not what we pride ourselves on.
No, I mean, he's a very articulate speaker. He makes as good a case, I guess, as you can make with this, but I'm not convinced at all. I mean, his thing is like, hey, you're a guest. Character's a factor when you get these visas and that. And if we discover this, and then why not? So I mean, what would be your counter to some of those specific points that have come up?
Absolutely. So, number one, if you like what speakers are being deported today, you might not like when the next president says, I don't want Jordan Peterson in this country, expressing his viewpoints. I think they are dangerous for this country. Jordan Peterson has to go. There's a lot of different speakers from around the world coming to the United States who you very much might agree with, if you support what Rubio's doing here, who you would really hate to see kicked out just because the administration doesn't like what they have to say. But even, on a more broad level, something people don't totally understand is that, the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, that's our free speech protection. First Amendment, Congress shall make no law, abridging our freedom of speech. And so some people thinks that means, the First Amendment gives us our rights as citizens, but that's actually not the case. What we believe in this country is that just whether you want to say it's God given, whether you want to say it's just part of being a human being, but you have freedom of speech just because you're a human being. And so the First Amendment doesn't give us those rights. The First Amendment limits what the government can do about those rights.
Really
And I
good.
think that's
Yeah,
really important for people to
really important.
understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it limits what the government can do when it doesn't like speech. But it doesn't say, "Oh, because you're an American, you have free speech." That's not how it works. And I
Because
I
we're
honestly
such
I
a
think that's
lovely
beautiful.
government and we're so kind-hearted, you can have some free speech. Not too
Exactly.
much. Leave
It's
some for yeah.
it's not a gift. It's not
No.
a gift the government gives us. It's
Mm,
something that as
mm.
human beings we innately have. And I think that's important. And if you want to even remove the legal question, I think that's really beautiful. This idea that we believe free expression is an innate part of the human spirit. I feel that way, and I want to keep fighting for an America that believes that too.
We are creative beings,
Yeah.
and we need speech in order to become the best version of ourselves, really.
There's one case, Supreme Court case in the US that I really like to talk about. It's Cohen v. California. It's about a man who wore a jacket that's criticized the draft using a certain four-letter word, which I don't know if I should say on your podcast. Um,
We work blue here sometimes.
But in this opinion, defending this man's rights, there's this one phrase that the Supreme Court used, and it was "one man's vulgarity is another's lyric." And it's this idea that, free speech protections allow us to find what's meaningful to ourselves.
Mm.
And for each different person, that might be a different thing. My vulgarity might be your lyric and vice versa. But that's the beauty of a free country, that you can have that chance to find what's meaningful for you without the government dictating it to you. And so that's kind of what
Mm.
free speech means to me.
Yeah, no,
Letting
that's
you see, letting you find meaning.
oh, that's wonderful and so well articulated, and a really good example. I think back to the punk rock movement, right?
Mm.
And I'm a little young for the movement. I would have still been at primary school, um, when it when it was happening. But I've always been a fan of it, and I've always been really tickled by just how far they'd go with some of the
Mhm.
lyrics, which were just offensive and just absolutely ridiculous. You had to laugh at them. You couldn't be too offended. But it was a whole group of people in this sweaty little box, moshing, throwing each other around, and listening to this ridiculous stuff. It was a celebration of freedom, really.
Yeah.
That's what it was, and there's something cathartic about it. The fact they can do that, you know,
Mhm.
blow out the cobwebs by just what's the worst thing you can think or say? Get it, put it on the table, you know. Let's
I
hear
I
it all.
sometimes think, about horror that way. I wanna be very
Yeah.
clear, I do not like horror. It is
Oh, I
not of
do.
interest to me.
I write
But
horror scripts.
I have friends who tell me how meaningful, a certain horror film they watched was to them, and they have a totally different perception of it than I do, and I think that's really incredible. That's a more interesting world when you can have people who see things differently than you do and explain to you why it's meaningful, and maybe it broadens your mind a little bit, and then maybe what you love can broaden their mind. I don't know, you can't have a very interesting, fulfilling world, without people having the freedom to discover these things, that others may hate and find disgusting and disturbing.
Yeah,
That's
I was
freedom.
talking about horror with another guest, and for me, I think there's something vicarious, and this is a dimension of free speech and free expression too. I think that when you think, because I'm a screenwriter and in my day job, and I've written a few horror films and had commissions, and I do get to that moment where I'm going, this is so disgusting. Why am I doing this, and why is this happening? Because I'm under the bonnet, and I'm like, why is it happening? Like the Friday the 13th films, it's like they all arrive at camp, kill, 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 end. It's like, well, that's just what's compelling about that. But it is about, I think, and I could be wrong, but it's a vicarious. You're living vicariously through a trauma, and
Yes.
you're having to make
Yep.
ethical and moral decisions for yourself. What would I have done? Oh, because often people yell at the screen in horror films and go, "Oh, you stupid woman!
Don't
I
go
would
in that basement.
don't go down. No, jump out the window." It's quite interactive in that way. It's like jump out the window, or don't open that box. It feels like it's allowing for these vicarious sort of judgments to be made by the viewer. A little bit of a detour there, but I think it's quite interesting. That
Yeah, and
whole
it's not something that I enjoy, but, as I mentioned, but I think there's probably some value to, thinking about the depths of, human depravity, because
yeah,
unfortunately, that actually happens in real life and not just in horror films, and I don't know, maybe horror is a safe place to
it's a safe
think about
place.
those, the bad things about the human spirit
Capacity,
and the human
our
mind.
capacity for
Yeah,
good and bad. Yeah, no, I think
and
it
so I
is.
I don't wanna watch them, but may all the horror writers out there keep working on their craft.
Oh, I've got a stack of DVDs we gotta watch when you come down. Don't worry about that.
Absolutely not.
so, 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 um, uh, all right. So going back to the global expression thing, uh, so, so JD Vance, he's got a point, but he needs to probably tend to his own garden.
Exactly. And I think, earlier you were asking for an example maybe of, what this looks like. And I think the United Kingdom is a pretty good example of this in sort of every single way. They're choosing censorship and overregulation in ways that really are stifling their people's
It's
ability to
horrible.
speak freely. And so
Yeah.
you had thousands of people being arrested for what's basically mean tweets each year.
Yeah.
And you also have last year, probably a couple of thousand people were arrested for criticizing the ban on Palestine action. And I'm not even discussing the ban on Palestine action, which, the ban was over them vandalizing some military planes. But people who just held signs saying, I disagree with that ban were arrested. And here's the crazy part, they were hit with terrorism charges because
Yeah.
they held signs.
I
It's
mean, material
it's
support for
incredible.
terror is different, but just
It is.
saying,
That's saying, "I'm writing a $1,000 check
here's a
to
check.
this
Yeah,
so
buy a
you
couple of
can buy
rockets.
bombs."
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. But
But
like,
just saying a sign isn't terrorism.
well, what if you were wanting to challenge? What if you were protesting to challenge that not ban, what's the word I'm looking for? The ruling, the ruling that it was a terror group. What
Yeah.
if you're like, hey, we think that's unfair, so we're gonna protest about this until there's this is looked at again. I mean, that would be criminal, wouldn't it? Because that's
Yeah.
sort of what
I
these
believe
people were
some people
doing.
were arrested just for saying, "I have a problem with the ban." Not even
Yeah.
many people for saying, "I support this group," and not saying, "I offer financial support, I'm helping to buy things they're using to vandalize," but just saying, "I support this group more broadly." And then people saying, "I oppose the ban," getting arrested and hit with terror charges. That should make us step back, and that it's become so normalized that people weren't really thinking about it is incredible. So we have those things going on, and then we also have the UK Online Safety Act, which is an absolute disaster. It
Mm.
treats broadly defined harms as words as harms that are so dangerous that there needs to be mass fines, mass regulation. I just a couple weeks ago, Ofcom, which is their media regulation board, they issued or they announced new rulings are coming for streamers, so like Netflix, Hulu, ones that aren't based in the UK, but allowing people to make complaints over offensive and harmful content. So now we're going to have, and now if you want an example of how these kinds of regulations can influence other countries' free speech, we
Mm.
now might have Netflix, for example, saying, "All right, we don't want to risk a fine for putting up a show in the UK that people will say is offensive. So it's maybe not worth us making the show at all if we can't show it to millions of customers.
Yeah,
So
we're
we're just
losing.
not going to
Yeah,
make this show for anyone." And that's how you
yeah.
can, more quietly influence content on a global scale. And
Mm.
people might not notice it. We won't know that Netflix is saying we're not going to greenlight this show.
No, it's not.
Um,
They're never going to be transparent about that. We'd love to give you better content and more edgy stuff, but those bloody palms. Yeah.
But again, one man's vulgarity is another lyric. We should
Mm.
have the ability to watch these shows without a government regulator saying, "We're gonna decide what's right for you." And, I think earlier we hinted we might get to the, age gating question, the under 16, but part of this is also about, limiting minors' access to, offensive shows on Amazon Prime or Netflix. I already know of a way to limit minors' access. They're called parents.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
We don't need the government deciding what everyone's kids are allowed to watch. That's probably a job for the parents.
Mm, mm. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Well,
and so, we have this going on in the UK, but this is happening everywhere. It's
mm,
happening in the US, it's happening, the biggest origin of it was Australia,
mm,
with the under 16 law it passed, I believe, last year, might have been
mm.
2 years ago at this point. But that kind of set off a global domino collapse
That's an
where every
interesting part of it
country.
too. The fact that someone comes up with this idea, like we've got people we've got the government here now wanting to push it, and
Hmm.
we're going to challenge that because there's a lot of different strands to an under 16 ban.
Exactly.
Like
People think it's
it's
simple. It's not.
no, it's an octopus. It's like you've got the end of anonymity on the net, or
Yep.
potentially.
That's what it is.
That's what it is. Yeah. Um.
Because, so here's a couple of reasons
Mm,
why it's the end of anonymity. So you might say, okay, they're going to contract with private companies that they'll be the ones that are really doing the identity checks. So you don't have to worry about it because it's not going to be the government knowing that, what you're posting on Reddit, what you're seeing on Reddit. Uh, People are a little overconfident in the cybersecurity of these companies. We've already had a number of hacks where people's information that they've handed over to age verification companies has been released. So on that front, that information is going to come out.
mm, mm.
I don't want to be harsh, but you're a fool if you think it won't.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But then also some it might be actual government run. So you might have to show your ID to the government and say, I want to access this content you say is harmful and offensive. You can see why that might cause some free speech issues on the internet from people who don't want to speak their minds, who don't want to tell the
Well,
government what they're doing.
well, if anyone thinks that the UK within a couple of years wouldn't just go, you're not allowed to ever be on the internet again, buddy. You've 3 strikes, you're out. They would have, a Keir Starmer would have no problem doing that.
Well,
No
and
problem
there's
whatsoever.
already been suggestions that they might try to look at banning VPNs because obviously adults don't want to have to verify their age
Yeah.
to post on the internet, so they're
Mm,
using VPNs. But obviously, governments don't like that. It's a very clear, easy workaround to their rules. So,
mm.
and if you look at the list of countries that currently ban VPNs, it's not a good one to be on.
No,
You're not
no.
in good company.
It's one of like those lists at the UN. It's like this is who supported Iran, and you read it and go, "Ugh."
Yeah, it's usually a murderer's
Reactionary
row,
states.
perhaps
Yeah, like
literally.
yeah, this terrible. Um, yeah, I mean, Keir Starmer. There was a meeting. I think Trump might have been in the room with him, and it could have been at the White House actually, where he's like, "Yeah, well, we can assure you, we do have free speech." It's like, are you chutzpah? Where's the lightning strike? It's like, dude, who do you think? But I mean, do you think they believe in their heads that it's still free speech? We're just getting rid of all this other stuff. I mean, I wonder. I mean, I try to get in their heads all the time. Uh, I think that to me, a leader like that that's wanting to ban to the degree they are feels like they're losing a grip on society. Um, that they should have. I'm not even sure that a leader should. Yeah, to me, culture is ground up. It's not top down.
Mhm.
But uh, but it's one of those situations where I think they're in a situation where we ban this. Okay, now we're accused of not applying it equally because censorship is never applied equally.
Sure.
And so they go over here, and before you know it, you got the situation where it's whack-a-mole. They're just whacking all these gophers or moles as they come up.
Uh-huh.
Um, that's my read on it. But also the thing with England too is that it's got I think it's long had a culture of suppression, which I would probably tie to the class system. I interviewed a very interesting English guy who's in the States now. He imports or restores old Italian zombie films and things like that from the
Everything's
70s.
back to horror.
Everything's back to horror. No, but it's a fascinating story, this guy, because in the 80s when the VHS came out, there was a lot of hysteria around that. Like,
Mhm.
and the chief censor at the time, he was there from like 75 to like 85, right through into the Thatcher era. He was making decisions like, if you see a blood on a breast,
Mhm.
we edit it. Now, there's no science that says people will be instantly inflamed when they see this, society will crumble. That was his taste, that was his,
Yeah.
he was reacting to it, so cutting it out. So what it meant is like this guy, he's a young kid at the time, and he's wanting to collect all these films. Most of them are banned and cut to ribbons. If they're there, they're heavily edited. So he's going to Holland and places like that, the Netherlands and stuff, and doing these little black market sort of swaps and smuggling his VHSs back in to the country. But the pause button was a big one for people back then. Talk about the printing press causing all this sort of trouble, because you could pause on the dirty bits and the violent
Yep.
bits. And
Well, it's incredible. Every piece of technology represents an existential threat to society.
well, yeah,
Every time.
and
Without fail.
we're laughing about this now, but at the time it was like, how are we going to deal with the pause button? Like, it was actually quite a big deal. But for him, this guy was telling me that there was a statement or some sort of public an interview where the chief censor said, "I'm not worried about certain people. It's the panel beater in his bedsit in Bedford." So he's saying it's the working class guy in his studio, pausing this thing and rewinding and looking again. He said, "I'm worried about the lower classes." And of course, art cinema wasn't treated that harshly,
Mm,
because
sure.
educated people would be watching it. But I
And
think
it's
that,
the responsibility of the upper class to protect the lower class
it,
against their
yeah,
base insult their
well,
base
their base
instincts. Yeah.
instincts, yeah. So
Yeah.
and I think that in England, that class system is just way more pronounced still, in a way that we sort of, it's easy probably for an American and even a New Zealander to not grasp.
Mm.
Like, a lot of this is driving it for me. That's my theory anyway.
Yeah, that's interesting. Oh, and I wanna return to, your earlier question about Starmer saying, "Well, of course we have free speech."
Yeah.
I think it's interesting because, if you look at sometimes countries like China or what's happening in Hong Kong, they will say, "Of course we have free speech," but
Mm,
what you're talking about isn't free speech. So it's very easy to say we have free speech when you make these huge exceptions to it and just decree by fiat that that's no longer free speech.
mm,
If we don't
mm,
like
mm,
it, that means it isn't free speech. So why would you want to, protect something that isn't free speech in the first place? And
mm,
this is something you can see, across countries, across governments, across political parties. Everybody has their little carve outs that aren't actually free speech. And so it's very, I think it's sort of a cognitive dissonance that comes really simply to people because most people don't want to say they're on the side of censorship. It's
mm.
uncool.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
don't want to come across that way. So it's just an easy out to say yes,
Mm.
I absolutely the free speech, but of course I support free speech, but
Yeah.
that's not free speech.
Oh, we get that on our social medias. People going, "It's not free speech, you clowns. It's hate speech. That's the difference." And it's like, well, no, no, I'm sorry, that won't do. Yeah.
I hope someday people can understand the risks of really broad conceptions of hate speech. I've been following the news in Australia, for example, with the new
Mm.
laws that have been passed
Oh,
after the
crazy.
horrific shooting in December. And uh, I hope it's clear to people how dangerous these laws are. If I saw someone was wearing a T-shirt with the slogan that the government decreed hateful and is now arresting people for it. That's scary. That's not something healthy in a democracy.
No, it's not. And I don't know how it helps the Jewish community. I don't know how it helps any minorities for people who might be uh, naturally hostile, to see a government cracking down on what should be completely permissible in a democracy for us. you know,
Yeah,
like, that's where the whole narrative of like we're driving this comes from. I think it's damaging to relations between groups,
yeah,
if anything.
absolutely. One example that I really think is interesting, and I'm not sure if these numbers have changed in the past couple of years, but I would have to see if there's been new data on it. But there are a number of countries that ban Holocaust denial. Um, especially European countries, the idea that this kind of speech is so fundamentally disruptive to society, disruptive to minority communities, specifically the Jewish community, that governments have to censor it to protect people from harm and to
Mm.
protect people from anti-Semitism. But the countries that ban it have higher rates of anti-Semitism
Yeah,
than the United States, for example, which
yeah.
does not ban Holocaust denial, which under the First Amendment could not ban it. And a lot of people will point to the US and say, how horrible is it that you allow people to say this without censorship? Well, it doesn't actually make society more hospitable to Jewish communities to ban this speech.
Well, there's
And,
no
and that's important.
yeah, it is. I mean, there's no real proof that any of this stuff works to
Sure.
I mean, have you uncovered anything that suggests that hate speech laws mean less racism or less?
If I did, maybe I would change my mind about the big beautiful project of free speech, but I don't see it there. I don't see it fixing problems. I see it causing more polarization, censorship, and I also see it giving governments power, vast power, to censor political speech in ways that I think infringe on really important debates, even if those debates sometimes contain speech that I find offensive, disagree with, don't really think is right or accurate or kind. It gives governments a lot of power to infringe on what should just be core political speech, and that's always the thing you need to avoid. I personally, I believe in human beings. I believe ultimately we can solve our problems. I don't necessarily believe that government officials can solve those problems for us by telling us what we can see and think and believe.
No, with some of the cultural issues, there is a like, let's force a consensus here. Like, let's take the debate away from society, and we'll make the call for you. I think with the gender
Yeah.
critical thing, and I'm sympathetic to both sides of that debate, but it had to be a debate. People had to talk about it. People had to get into the corners, the nooks and crannies, the difficulties. We had to learn where there was going to be complete impasses that would not go away. I mean, I can live with that sort of ambiguity and stuff like that, but many can't. Many are probably a bit more black and white. But
And one
we had,
thing that I go on.
I don't know, we had to have that debate. We have to have those debates. It's
Yeah,
not
you have
for
to be able
mm,
to talk about things, and one thing I like to point people to is, in the US, I think in the past 100 years, there have been a lot of there's still a lot of work to be done, but there have been a lot of really incredible, advances and movements, by people advocating for minority communities. I mean, until the '70s, women couldn't have credit cards in their own names. It's this stuff takes time, and it's a lot more recent,
I'm on the
than
fence with that
people
one.
might realize.
2 marriages later. No, it's all right.
Um, but free speech is vital to those movements, and if you
Mm,
take away free speech, who do you think the government is going to silence? Probably minority communities.
yeah,
Progress
yeah.
isn't going to be achieved by giving government the power to silence progress.
No, no. Well, the Palestine thing's interesting because a lot of the people that are really up in arms now would have been very pro hate speech laws 2 years ago or 3 years ago. They would have been. They are the same people. Even in our country, a lot of the people that are getting quite worked up about bans and everything were the people that were really championing hate speech laws. Um, so a a bit of self-reflection goes a long way, because what they're basically saying is everything I believe is good speech. Everything you believe is bad speech. It's like, what is really? Is that the way it works? It's like,
Well, and
come on.
that's something that I've been, especially trying to convey, because when I speak to students, college students tend to be more left leaning, more
Mm,
liberal. That's often tends to be the case, and sometimes I've gotten questions from them like, "How can you think it's okay for hateful speech, for cruel speech, to be protected, to for people to be allowed to walk down the street yelling hate slogans, and it's just fine?" And one, they have their own speech, they can counteract it. But two, I like to explain to these people who's in power today. Do you really want Donald Trump deciding what hate speech is, you probably wouldn't like that outcome.
Mm,
And in fact, I think we're seeing the outcome of what it means
mm.
when we had our Pam Bondi say not too long ago that hate speech isn't protected. Do you really want the Trump administration to decide what's hateful? Probably not. So the only safe way to make sure that your rights can't be violated is to make sure other people's rights can't be violated. It's not always comfortable, it's not always fun, but that's just the basics of a free society. That's the trade-off.
Yeah, well, I say this to people that sort of push back on me. It's like, "Oh, you defended this group, and you shouldn't have defended them, and you should." It's like we've never really defended individuals at all, honestly. If we were to be honest about it, it's
It's
always the
defending a
principle.
principle.
That's
Mhm.
all it ever is. The principle can have a face at times, but it's interchangeable because if I'm allowing for, if I'm pushing against a ban on, say, public venues, having a controversial speaker in, if I win, then every speaker is going to win along
Mhm.
with me.
Exactly.
The
Yeah.
the
Y
person's polar opposite, the counterpart is going to be able to benefit from that. But
yeah.
people still don't get it. It's a simple. It's very simple free speech, but people do get tangled out still, don't they? Um,
They do, and I think it's, people who care about the principle of free speech, they're always gonna be suspicious, they're always gonna be rolling that boulder up the hill, but it's been that way throughout human history. I think obviously some things are different now, social media is a little different, the way that certain technology operates, sure, is a little different than it was 500 years ago. But human beings are still the same, for the most part, and so we're still going to be fighting those same impulses that we all have. I think all of us have a little sensor within us, some
yeah,
bigger than others,
yeah.
and that's just human nature, and so, I'm okay with knowing that I will always be rolling this boulder up the hill.
Yeah. Well, so we've been talking a while. It's been fantastic. I've really enjoyed it. But let's go through a little bit of a preview of what you would like to speak about when you're here, and then we'll go through some of your dates again. But
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
so so, what would you like to speak to New Zealanders about, to Kiwis? What would you like to? What do you want to impart to Kiwis?
So I want to, use my book as a launching off point about a broader discussion about institutions not being able to stand by free expression and choosing other things over free speech, things that seem more appealing at the time, but are actually really damaging to society in the long run. So in this case, it's universities saying, yeah, I'm going to take that 2 million check, and if it comes with some strings attached, so be it. And I want to talk about how that exchange, that price tag that you're willing to put on your values, actually hurts a lot of people. It hurts students who are actually maybe dissidents from that government or from the country that you're taking money from. How it hurts academics who want to be able to speak. And so, using that as a launching off point, I'm going to talk about, more broadly in society, how we're um, choosing other things over free expression and how, it might create a quieter, less interesting, um, less intellectual, less free world.
Mm, mm. Going back to what we were just talking about, there could be pushback on the whole Trump thing because I think a lot of people who are upset at the woke, who have sort of gravitated towards us, may be like, "Well, no, 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 he's better than the others. He's actually doing really." So articulating that's going to be quite important and revealing, the
Yeah,
depth of some of the censorship that is happening.
I am more than happy to, explain the full picture of that, because, especially if you're not living in the US, maybe you're not seeing all of it, but it's really been a society-wide effort, from the Trump administration trying to silence its critics. So, universities, law firms, media outlets, politicians, he's accused of sedition. I mean, it's incredible. We're having, in some ways, debates that we thought we settled 100 years ago in the United States about sedition, things like that. But some people look at that and they say, well, I don't like universities, I don't like media outlets anyway, so who cares? Obviously, I really strongly disagree with that, but he's also targeting everyday people too. The administration's targeting everyday people. We have our Department of Homeland Security actually sending out these secretive subpoenas to sites like Google to get the information of people who have criticized ICE and immigration enforcement in the United States on social media. That's incredible. It's
What are
disturbing and shocking.
Yeah, what are they gonna do with that information? Like, what
There's been a few people have come forward who have said they've had DHS agents visit their house and question them about emails they've sent criticizing ICE. It's shocking levels of
just
oppression
just
and censorship.
just to intimidate, probably.
Sure.
So there might
Mhm.
not be arrests or anything.
Sure, and that intimidation alone, that's the whole concept of chilled speech. This
Yeah,
idea that, you know, okay, maybe this time they were just questioning me. What's going to happen the next time they show up
yeah.
at my door? And
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's that fear that's being instilled, and I think the fear that you see in societies around the world, some very authoritarian ones, that
Mm.
uh, there might be a real consequence if I speak my mind about the government, and to see that happening in the United States is shocking. It's unacceptable. So that's something we're fighting here, and we
And
hope to
needs
see
to be
these.
articulated. Yeah, because that pushback may happen. It's like, oh, he's a free speech hero, you know. And look, with all of these people, yes, they do some good things that you like and you appreciate. Biden would have, Trump would have, all our leaders. Starmer's probably done a few things that, but you you've got to be consistent with the principle.
Absolutely.
Because again, it's not about the administration. It's what gets normalized that people
Hmm.
really have to appreciate. It's like, the whole police arriving at your door and knocking and talking for like 15 minutes and then leaving. That's a really unsettling experience.
Yes.
It
No
reminds me
matter
of
what country you're in. Yeah.
it reminds me of the beginning of The Trial by Franz Kafka. That's a horrible scene, isn't it? Where he
Yeah.
wakes up and it's like, why? It's because the thing with free speech is you often, with speech or speech problems that the government taking issue to things you say, is you often don't know what you said that could have offended them.
Mhm.
Like Franz K. You're going, that's what I did say that. Surely it wouldn't have been that. Oh, it's that. Well,
And
I
then
never
so
would have picked that
everything you
up.
say, you
Mm,
have a second thought about,
everything
"Oh,
you
what if
say.
this gets me in trouble?" And so you
Yeah,
you become your own internal censor. The
yeah,
state kind
yeah.
of forces you to be your own police, to stop yourself and to say, "Is that safe for me to say? Is that allowed?" And that's kind of the scariest, most disturbing form of censorship when we're forced to internalize it into
Mm.
ourselves. And I don't wanna see that happen to Americans
No,
or
no.
anyone.
Well, it can happen to you, but not me. No, well, no, that's right. Well, look, we've been talking an hour, and it's been fantastic. I've really, really enjoyed it, and I
Mhm.
hope to meet you in Wellington. I'll come down and
Great, looking
meet.
forward to it.
Yeah, no, it'll be
Don't bring
good.
your horror DVDs.
Stack. I'll have a stack of them under my chin. Where do I put these? To get them out of here. So you'll be in Auckland on the 19th. So this is
Mhm.
like a month away now.
Yeah, it's coming
Auckland,
up.
yeah, it's coming up. Auckland on the 19th. We've got Tauranga, which I just actually did a panel up there last week, and that's a lovely lovely town actually, a smaller centre, but it's on the east coast there, and the Bay of Plenty it's called, and that it's it's a smaller centre, but normally there's a really good turnout for us, so that's awesome. Wellington is that's the Beltway, that's our DC, so that'll be fun. That's on the
Well, then I'm
22nd.
not going, no.
We'll get some dignitaries and important people to meet you. Christchurch in the South Island, our second largest city, that's on the 23rd, and Dunedin, the
Yeah.
penguin place. Yeah, so happy feet. Um, So that's on the 24th. So that's a really good tour. And yeah, getting you down to Dunedin's great. Like I said, a student town, and
Great.
hopefully there'll be some really good conversation to be had there. So fantastic. Looking forward to it. I think what you're speaking about is very important, especially with the some of the laws that are coming up here. It's like wildfire, isn't it? Obviously, there's
Yep.
coordination. I don't want to sound conspiratorial, but it's like, oh, well, they're doing the ban. Well, let's give it a go now. Like they're
Oh,
doing it. We've got
absolutely.
our buddies are backing us up. It's got that sort
Yeah,
of
I don't even think it's even conspiracy. I think
no.
they say, "Oh, that looks good over there. Let's try it here."
Well, yeah, yeah. Anyway, okay. So, Sarah, thanks for joining us. It was wonderful, and I'll do my sign off, which I hope I get right this time. So, people, if you enjoyed this fantastic episode, I don't know why you wouldn't, but anyway, if you enjoyed this fantastic episode, and you want to speak to us about anything, or maybe talk about you have questions, or there's ideas you have for future episodes, reach out to us at podcast at fsu.nz. That's podcast at fsu.nz. And do look at our socials. We'll have a link here advertising the tour, but you really want to be a part of this. It's going to be a fantastic tour. There'll be Q&As. You'll get to ask questions. It'll be really good. So support Sarah and come and get your questions ready, and be ready for a very enlightening evening.
All right, can't wait.
Thank you for listening to Free to Speak. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and consider sharing the podcast with others. We release new episodes regularly, and subscribing is the easiest way to stay up to date. If you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions, you can contact us at podcast@fsu.nz. If you want to find out more about the New Zealand Free Speech Union, visit fsu.nz.